You've heard us say it repeatedly. What we believe shapes what we do. So what are the common misconceptions about child sexual abuse that we tend to believe? In this section, we will spend time looking at common misconceptions surrounding sexual abuse and how we can become better informed about this risk to children that often goes undetected.
One common misconception about child sexual abuse is it's just not that big of a problem. What we know from academic studies is that 1 in 4 female children and 1 in 6 young men will have been sexually abused before he or she reaches 18 years of age. As well, 66% of children who were sexually abused do not disclose until adulthood, if ever. That's 2 out of 3 children don't tell until adulthood, if ever. And that statistic doesn't skip any socioeconomic status, any educational level, any cultural demographic, or any spiritual belief or denomination. It is across the board in all levels of society. On the offender side of the equation, the numbers of abusers continue to increase. In one very large offender study looking at the criminal behavior of convicted male offenders, the average convicted male abuser who molested boys had an average of 150 victims prior to criminal prosecution. In that same study, convicted male molesters who preferred girls as victims had an average of 52 victims prior to criminal prosecution. But this information is new to most people, because for most of us, your information comes from one of 2 sources, either your own personal experience or what you've read in media coverage, neither of which is going to reveal these kinds of numbers. We know from offender studies that the average age of first offense for the convicted male offender is 13 or 14 years of age. The average age of criminal prosecution in this country is 34 to 36 years of age. And offender studies tell us that 85% of convicted male offenders say their first offense occurred before 18 years of age. These are not a bunch of single men. The majority of convicted male offenders are married, and typically they have children of their own. But I want you to hear this concept from an offender, because I believe it's a bit more compelling than hearing it from me.
I created my first male victim when I was 15. And I have been victimizing male children virtually nonstop until my incarceration. I have 11 male rape victims. I have one female rape victim. And I have approximately 1,250 male molest victims. And I say approximately because I really don't know. There were times when I went a whole week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks without ever molesting anybody. And there were other times that I molested daily, 2 and 3 times a day. On average, I would say I molested 5 children a week over that 20-year period.
So the problem is growing, and abusers will gravitate to the activities and programs where the barriers to entry are the lowest. And the barriers to entry are lowest where our learning curve is low. We can't address a risk that we don't understand. We will never be accidentally excellent at addressing this risk because we hold on to misconceptions about where and how it might arise. Another common misconception is too heavy of a reliance on criminal background checks. If you're over a certain age, you remember a time when criminal background checks did not occur in programs serving children. Criminal background checks have become a standard of care. They must occur, but they do not provide a standalone safety system. Here's why. Less than 10% of sexual abusers will encounter the criminal justice system ever. That means if your criminal background check is working perfectly, it's this little piece of the pie that's available in terms of the past criminal history of an individual. So criminal background checks are no silver bullet. They are not a standalone screening process or safety system. One of the most pervasive misconceptions in our society today is the concept of stranger danger. Stranger danger is the idea that the danger to our children comes from a stranger, someone outside the proverbial fence, not within the program or the community. Most of you were taught stranger danger by your parents. The idea that abusers are characterized by the stranger hanging out on the edge of a public park, wearing a black trench coat with candy spilling out of his pockets. And stranger danger is the basis for the preventative protocols put in place by most child-serving organizations, like matching tags or security systems in the program area. The problem with stranger danger is that 90% of children who are sexually abused are victimized by someone they know and trust. It's a family member, a family friend, a staff member, or a volunteer in a child-serving program. Commonly, it is not a stranger or someone unknown to that child. Statistically, abduction offenses, the Amber Alerts, the snatch and grabs perpetrated by a stranger are less than 5% of the criminally prosecuted offenses. Another common misconception is the idea that I'd be able to spot an abuser. There'd be something that I would see or intuit. In reality, there is no visual profile. Abusers look like you and me. Take a look at these images. Every one of these individuals has been convicted of crimes involving sexual offenses against children. These men are educated, most of them are married, most of them have jobs, and they look like productive members of society. But all of these individuals were trusted by an organization that gave them access to children. And this leads us to another common misconception, the idea that all abusers are men. In the convicted population, 90% of convicted sexual abusers are men and 10% are women. We don't know if this statistic reflects the offender population as a whole, but it's important to understand that some abusers are women. Again, look at these photos. All of these women have been convicted of sexual crimes against children. Like the men, some of these women are married, college educated, and have children. And just like the men, there is no visual profile to identify them as dangerous to children. They can look as safe and nurturing as someone's grandmother. The last misconception we're going to address is the idea that all abusers are adults. The statistics show us that 1 out of 3 reported cases of child sexual abuse are peer-to-peer issues, children who are victimizing other children. That's a shocking number. When an abusive child is in treatment and being evaluated, they're asked where they learned this behavior. And more often than not, when we follow the trail of abuse to its end, we find an adult who victimized a child, and the child is modeling that behavior with other children. We're going to talk more about peer-to-peer sexual abuse a little later, but as we identify the common misconceptions we hold, it's important to remember that abusers can be men, women, or children.
Now that we've addressed common misconceptions and highlighted the ways we let the wrong beliefs shape what we do, we're going to give you insight into the characteristics of an abuser so that we can start replacing misconceptions with good information.